Let's move to look at another special lens, the tilt-shift. Tilt-shift lenses, such as this 24mm example made by Canon, are still considered absolute essentials for any serious landscape, product, or architectural photographer. If you've never used one or heard of such a thing, you're probably wondering what on earth it is and how it works. Well, first, such lenses really do shift. They're designed so that the photographer can slide the lens to the left or to the right or lower or higher. Since the sensor stays in place, shifting the lens results in a new vantage point from which to see the subject. You might wonder why this is an advantage. Well, why not just move the camera? Well, here's an example. I wanted to make a photograph of Beaumont Tower, the bell tower on the Michigan State University campus that is one of the favorite sites. The bells chime every quarter hour, and there are beautiful concerts occasionally performed by the MSU Carillonneur. And now that you're part of the Michigan State University family, I hope you make it to campus sometime and listen to the bells. Well, when I aimed my 24mm lens at the structure, I found that the only way I could show the whole thing was to angle my camera upwards. The result of this was the parallel lines of the carillon now began to converge, sort of like a pyramid. The result would surely not make the architect very happy. I knew that the way to make sure that the sides of the structure did not become distorted was to keep the sensor parallel to it. The reason for the distortion in the previous slide was the tilting of the camera sensor when I tilted the camera back to photograph that building from top to bottom. When the camera was set up so that the sensor is perfectly aligned, however, with the architecture, this is all that I could see in the frame. I was certainly looking straight ahead, but since I was not on a platform of a height that would be exactly centered on the building, that straight-on view did not show the structure hardly at all. Now this is where the shift part of a tilt-shift lens is so useful. You'll have to take me at my word, and I certainly would not be dishonest with you. But this second photograph on the right was made less than a minute after the first one on the left, after simply shifting the lens to a higher position. The camera did not move, the exposure remained the same. The only thing that changed was the vantage point moving higher by shifting the lens. What a dramatic difference that shift makes, and how important it is if you want to make precise photographs of architecture and any other thing that you don't want to distort through tilting the camera and creating effects of perspective. Another use for the shift feature is to eliminate the reflection of the photographer from shiny surfaces. Let's say you're a safety inspector for your company, and you want to use photography to document the fire alarm system of a large building. You set up your camera to photograph the area and find that when you place your camera in the perfect spot, you see your own reflection in one of the devices. Take a look at the center dark box and you will see me. By picking up my tripod and moving the camera now to the right, then shifting the lens back left to a position close to my original placement, voila, I have disappeared, but also been able to photograph the scene from almost exactly the same spot. The other movement a tilt-shift lens can make is, of course, a tilt. Such lenses can be placed on the camera so that they tilt forwards or backwards. They can also be rotated 90 degrees on the camera so that that same tilting movement now becomes a swing to the left or to the right, as is shown in this view from above the camera. You're probably saying at this point, okay, now what on earth is the purpose of that? One of the things that such a movement permits is adjustment of the plane of focus. For example, if you're photographing a flat surface from an angle, you could swing the lens so that the angle of the surface and the angle of the lens are closely aligned. This photograph is from a series I created entitled Automobile-Related Landscape Sites in Greater Lansing, Michigan. The photographs were made with my very large format wooden 8x10 view camera. And the advantage of the view camera is that every lens is attached to a lens board that has the ability of shifting, swinging, tilting, and more. In this photograph, I swung the lens so that the plane of focus would align with the building surface, a flat plane that I was viewing from an angle so that it would stay sharp, focus, foreground to background. A visual effect that is popular with a number of photographers today is to use the tilt capability of the lens to do just the opposite of making sure that everything is in focus. By tilting or swinging the lens on an axis that is an extreme one, we can shift the plane of focus so that it actually cuts through the scene at an angle instead of staying parallel to the sensor. You're probably looking at this photograph and wondering how such a terrible damage could have been done to the camera lens. However, this is exactly how the lens should look if it is an extreme tilt model. While there are other options in the extreme tilt field, my favorite is the Lens Baby. The photographer Craig Strong made his first prototype when he actually attached a lens to a flexible vacuum cleaner hose and inserted the other end into his camera. What he had invented was a way to rotate the lens in ways that would create extreme distortions of focus. With the introduction of the first version, which did not include a vacuum hose, a star in the lens world was born. And today, the company makes a number of different versions of the original, along with other special purpose lenses. For this photograph, I used the Lens Baby Composer Pro with an Edge 50 lens. This lens creates a distinct band of focus with gradually diminishing focus effects on either side. This is what the front end of a beautiful American automobile, the Chevy Corvette Z06, looked like when I applied the unique interpretive capabilities of the lens. By placing the sweet spot of focus at the logo symbol for the car, the rest of the front end of the vehicle seems to vaporize, somewhat like the speedy car might look to another driver. When used from a high vantage point, this effect can create what are popularly known as Toy Town pictures, where the image looks like it is a close-up view of a miniature toy world. If you've ever seen photographs of model railroad settings where hobbyists spend their lives making miniature environments with great detail, you've seen photographs like this, but of toys, not the real world. In this picture, I look down from a fourth-story window in the Michigan State University Library at a solitary figure crossing a bridge over the Red Cedar River. Notice the extremely narrow spot of focus I was able to achieve with the Lens Baby. In this one, I looked lower and waited for another single figure, moving the sweet spot of focus to the top right of the scene and letting the cars be consumed by this misty lack of focus. Here I photographed a Michigan State University women's basketball game in their home stadium, the Breslin Center, from far above the action. Isolating the focus mainly on the visiting team, gathering around its coach to try to salvage their game against our Lady Spartans, you can see the cheerleaders and fans in the rest of the arena are quite out of focus using this technique. This photograph shows the scene from the same approximate vantage point with a normal 50mm lens, showing you how it matches up against the Lens Baby's 50mm as a comparison. Tilt and shift lenses are also commonly used for expressive food photography, where the creation of an atmosphere for the food is sometimes more important than simply documenting what it looks like. In such situations, the effects of extreme shallow depth of field and a bit of distortion introduced by a reverse tilt of the camera body, as in this example of a martini that I photographed, can work to satisfy a cuisine magazine editor or restaurant owner with photographs that are evocative and attractive rather than descriptive. The photograph on the left shows the scene with a normal 50mm lens, while on the right is how it looked using the Lens Baby. If anything, from perfectly accurate architectural photography to photographing objects and scenes and food to create a purely atmospheric interpretation, if this is an area of photography that you're interested in, then take a look at the options for tilt and shift.